Hello, I'm very happy to welcome here at ATB Guitars Mr. Mark Pontin.
Hello.
From the Mark Pontin Group, who is obviously the main frontman and songwriter of the Mark Pontin Group. I believe you're just in the middle of recording your third album now, is that right?
Yeah, just coming to the end of it actually. Yeah.
Just coming to the end, excellent. After the release of two very critically acclaimed albums.
Thank you, yes,
a few years ago, which have been received extremely well.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are looking forward to the new album. Can you give us some kind of clue as to what direction you're taking? Is it going to be still blues, rock-led tracks?
It is. It's. I would say it's more song-orientated.
Mm-hmm.
I like to challenge myself whenever I make a record to better the next one, or the last one, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas the last record, Textures, was a very guitar-orientated album, this one still has guitar, but I focused on the singing a lot more. Push myself as a singer, push myself as a writer, and see what I can pull out of myself as an artist. It's more about the artistry for me rather than repeating what I've done. So it's got a lot more than just blues influence. There's I've been listening to a lot of early 70s, late 60s, early 70s funk music. So there's a little bit of that creeping in. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of soul and R&B influence as well, within my limitations. Mm-hmm. Obviously, being a white Welsh boy, it's not I have to dig deep to get the real soul. But it's interesting. It's challenged me, and I hope people can hear that and appreciate the progression from the last two.
Good, excellent. Oh well, I'm sure there's a lot of people who look forward to hearing that. What were your early influences when you were growing up in Wales?
Well, the person that inspired me to play was Mark Knopfler, mm-hmm. And Dire Straits, and I was. I mean, you wouldn't think it by listening to me play because there's no playing influence left in my playing from Mark Knopfler. But sure. From Mark Knopfler playing with Eric Clapton, I saw that on TV and I was quite offended at first because who's this guy coming on stage with my Mark Knopfler? And of course, as soon as he started playing, then Eric Clapton was a major influence. Mm-hmm. Through Eric, I went backwards then and found John Mayall and all the blues guys. And actually, unlike a lot of people who get Stevie Ray Vaughan and then go back, I came forward then to Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. So I found Stevie Ray Vaughan to be the fastest guitar player I'd ever heard in my life when I heard him. Wow. And I've been listening to B.B. King and Albert King, and that was difficult enough to play. So, Robin Ford is another one. I like Robin Ford.
Oh, Robin Ford, yes.
Jeff Healey,
yeah,
people like that.
Yeah,
that kind of, sums it up.
Oh yes, you can hear a lot of this in your music. That's for sure. All these influences do definitely stand out. Yeah. So your new album, have you got a title for it yet?
Yes, it's going to be called Kaleidoscope. Even though there are probably 1,000 albums called Kaleidoscope, I decided to stick by it because, like my last album, the one similarity is that there's not one kind of genre of music that's typical throughout the album. I try and deviate within the blues rock sort of idiom. I think it's one of the genres where you can go a bit jazzy and you can go rocky and you can go funky and you can go bluesy, all in with the blues rock tag. Mm-hmm. So it does push the boundaries, and like a kaleidoscope, you can twist it and get different things when you twist the kaleidoscope. So it fitted the mantra of what I was writing,
I see. Oh, that sounds very intriguing. Is it, like Textures, going to have lots of really blistering, great guitar solos? I'm sure it's
got a lot of guitar on it. Obviously, it's there are some songs. We did do one song, for example, completely live in the studio, which will please the Jimi Hendrix fans and the guitar fans.
Oh, good.
There's one song which I call my epic song. Not the song title, but it took a lot of writing. It's a little similar to Kashmir, a little bit influenced by Led Zeppelin, and it's got a lot of real strings, orchestration on it and things like that. That's got a big guitar solo in it. I would say that it's going to please the guitar fans, but it's also going to be interesting for people who prefer melodies and prefer to be able to sing along with songs, and the vocals are at forefront for me.
Good, excellent. Okay, that's something to look forward to. And what is the likely release date of this?
At the moment, it's just coming to the end of the mixing stage. So once that's done and it's been mastered, I've got to pin down some PR. Mm-hmm. So probably I'd say the end of the summer, okay. maybe early autumn, and I'll be touring it then.
All right, brilliant. This leads on quite nicely to talking a bit about your tone, your setup, and what guitars you use. I've noticed whenever there's a video of you playing, you're usually playing a Fender something.
Yes.
A Stratocaster or a Telecaster.
Yeah.
Are those exclusively the two guitars you tend to use, or do you branch out at all?
If I'm honest, I'm predominantly a Stratocaster player.
Yeah.
I've always owned Telecasters, and I'm still getting used to them, even after many years of playing them. Mm-hmm. They're a different beast altogether, but it's the versatility of the Strat that's kept me there. And of course, my heroes all played Strats, really. So
indeed, yeah.
And also, I got a bad habit which I had when I started playing my very first guitar. It was a Jackson copy, and it had a Floyd Rose tremolo on it, which lifted up in the air. So I found that if I pushed with my wrist as I was playing, I could create vibrato, because I found finger vibrato quite hard back then. Mm. Of course, that's carried forward now to where if I haven't got a vibrato bridge, I find myself playing Italians, shaking my wrist, just as a matter of instinct. I'm starting to push myself, because there's something unique about a Telecaster, and I use them live a lot more than I used to. I do own some Gibson guitars. I use them in the studio mostly. I call them big riff guitars. My rig is set up for Fender guitars, single coils. So of course, yes. Stick a Les Paul there, and you got a lot more gain. Plus the volume knob's right down here, and because I use fuzz pedals, I'm always doing that with my fingers. So I can't do that on a Les Paul; it's too far away. So I use the Gibson guitars in the studio more.
Yes, I do remember now, because we sold you, in amongst all the lovely vintage guitars you bought, you bought an R9 from us as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
So you have, I believe, quite a collection now of vintage
yes,
Fenders.
I do.
What draws you to the vintage guitar as opposed to the new modern guitar?
There is something about when you pick up a vintage guitar and when you plug in a vintage guitar that you can't get in a modern, even a custom shop. I've got custom shop Fenders, mm-hmm. and it's like I don't know. There's something like the soul has been taken out of them. They're not the same. I think as the years go by with those old guitars, they just smooth off. The high end isn't so piercing as the modern one. The modern ones are sort of in your face. You know, the sounds are in your face. Mm-hmm. They still sound great, mm-hmm. but when you put the old ones on, a good old one, it seems to be comfortable, warm, smooth. That's all I can describe it. Plus, they all seem to resonate, or the ones I've got seem to resonate unplugged, to where it inspires me to want to play them. You know.
I do remember when you visited us before, you always try out a guitar acoustically.
Yes.
Quite a lot before you even think about plugging it in. Mm. Do you feel that's quite an important part of how
it's very important. I mean, most of my playing at home is unplugged on an electric guitar. Yeah. But it doesn't sound that much different to me from when I plug it in. Yeah. It's when I'm playing licks and runs and practicing whatever, I can take that and plug it into an amp and put the pedals on and get the same kind of feeling. And if the guitar isn't resonant, if the guitar isn't pleasing unplugged, then it's not going to be pleasing plugged in, as far as I'm concerned. You know?
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, when you think about it. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I believe you've brought with you, Mark, a couple of your favourite pieces.
I have.
Would you like to introduce us to
Sure.
a couple of them?
Well, this is a 19 '61 Stratocaster. And you know the story of this better than me. Was it a father and son that owned it, or?
That's what we were told. Yes.
Yeah, it's got
yes, from the same family.
Inscription on the back: Brandon Logsdon and Mick Logsdon. I think probably the father might have played this the most, and the son maybe didn't play it as much, because as you can see, it's been well played
and well loved. Yes.
Well loved.
Yes.
And it was very smoky when I got it, but I found it was coming off on my arm and coming off my clothing, so I have no intention of selling it. As you can see, I've got my clothing's now starting to dye into the wood and stuff, so I removed it with a little bit of naphtha, left it in the more difficult areas, but it's still got the nicotine on the back of the headstock. I didn't touch it up there, I left that there.
Yeah.
You can still see it on the machine heads there as well. But yeah, it's just a special guitar. I mean, the ones that look like this were played for a reason, because they were good. What I love about guitars is that you're just a custodian of it.
Indeed.
You were allowed it for a period of time in your life, and then someone else takes it on, and they make memories with it, you know. So I'm privileged to be able to take this guitar and now use it on recordings, use it live, you know.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful guitar.
And it just so everyone knows, this is a 1961 Fender Stratocaster, original slab board, and also very rare original blonde finish.
That's right, yeah.
And because it's a blonde finish, it's got an ash body.
Ash body, yeah.
Do you find they sound different, having an ash body, to the normal older you would get on a Sunburst?
I find that it's got a different voice, definitely.
It does, yeah.
A friend of mine's got a 61 and it's an older. And it sounds totally different.
Yes, we do find the 50s Mary Kay, which we had recently here, that sounded quite different to the other Strats we had. Yeah. And this, for all intents and purposes, Mary Kay. It has the same combination of a ash body, blonde finish. This one obviously has the slab fretboard.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a chunkier neck than I usually have on them.
It does. For a 61, it's got a very chunky neck.
Yes, I mean, it's not too chunky, it's not overly chunky. It's a nice size down here, and then as it gets up, it's a little fuller up there, but it's nicely worn away. All the finishes come off the back. It's just like an old friend. Even when I first picked it up, it was like an old friend. I mean, I can walk into a guitar shop and walk past 20 guitars, and something will draw you into one of them, you know. It happens rarely, but this one was definitely one of those. I was drawn to it immediately. It had a kind of connection, you know.
I do remember you coming to visit me, and this guitar seemed to click with you straight away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it did.
In fact, you were the only person to see this guitar before we had even had a chance to put it on a website properly. It was.
I had to be quick.
Yeah, it was straight away. Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it served you well.
It has. It features on the new album a lot. I actually did a lot of demos in the house, first of all. So I was using this at the time, because it's been refretted since then, but at the time the frets were original, or the previous frets. And I was using this just sitting in the house, and I remember doing one solo, and I thought, this was just for the demo, and I thought, I don't think I'm going to be able to replicate that solo. So I actually reamped that solo. So there is one solo on the album where I did hold my hands up, record it in my bathrobe, and I won't tell you which one, using this guitar, so yeah.
Oh, excellent. Gosh. Have you done anything to it? I believe you've refretted it, haven't you?
I have refretted it, yeah.
And you put a 5-way switch in?
5-way switch, refretted it, and mod the tone so that you can have it for this pickup. I use jumbo 6100 frets. This guitar, a couple of the frets were loose on the previous fret job, wasn't that great. So I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong with it, but when I would slide, it would catch my fingers, and I would think, what's wrong with this guitar? So I took it to the only guy I trust with vintage guitars, which is a guy called Gary Lewis from Swansea. And he said, well, some of them have been glued in and they've come away, and etc. So he did an amazing job. He does all my guitars, and He knows how I like them set up, slightly high action, you know. He's obviously put a new nut in for me, even though I've got the old nut.
Yeah.
A 5-way switch. I know that some people don't change them, don't change them. But I can't, in the heat of battle, trying to get it into those positions, you know.
It's a working guitar.
Exactly. Yeah.
Indeed.
Exactly.
Yes. Which is good. So for your tone setup, you have the bottom tone affects the bridge pickup, and the middle tone pot, does that affect the middle pickup or the neck pickup?
As stock, so you'll have to remind me on what
That'll be the
usually
middle
is.
pickup.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that I don't touch that. You know, it's just leave that like it is.
Can we have a look at the Telecaster you've brought in?
So this is a late '63, early '64 Telecaster. It's got a December '63 neck date, so it was released in '64. All original finish. Again, I've refretted it with 6/100s, or should I say Gary refretted it with 6/100s. Apart from that, it's totally stock. I think it's got the original switch as well in this one. It's not.
I believe it has, yeah.
Yeah. So, apart from the refret and a setup, I haven't done anything to it at all.
Do you still have it wired for woof tone setting?
No, that's one thing I have
good.
changed. Yeah. So all original. Again, the neck's nicely worn away.
I can see.
And it's. I play this guitar every single day.
Wow.
Mostly unplugged. It does have a little microphonic issue, but rather than change the pickup, I'm learning to deal with it. So certain rooms I might drop the tone down a little bit when I'm on that pickup, just the volume down a little bit, you know. Anything I can to avoid the squealing. I don't use it on really high gain.
Yeah.
And this has been featured on the album a lot as well. This is one live little segue, which we were just goofing around with the keyboard player that I had in, and I decided to keep it as a little 30-second instrumental interlude, and this was used on that. And it's just an amazing guitar.
Oh, wow.
I think when I saw it, all I did was that. And I said, yeah, that's got to come with me.
Yes, I believe you did. I do remember that. Who needs an amplifier when you have a guitar as resonant as that? I do remember it's one interesting what we were saying about the microphonic issue with the Telecaster. It's endemic for a lot of Telecasters we sell. A lot of pickups do tend to become slightly microphonic to a certain degree, but it's something which is part of a character of a vintage Telecaster, and it's something which I think a lot of people could learn to live with as long as they don't expect too much from it. And are you finding that you're able to live with this small issue of microphonics? It's just a matter of adapting.
Yeah. At first it was oh no, there's something wrong with my setup. Not being experienced with the Telecaster, and I spoke to a few people, and they said, well, sometimes you can just be the bridge plate might be loose. Sometimes it can be the pickup rubbers need a bit of adjustment. And I contemplated changing the pickups, and I thought, no, there's got to be a reason why people don't do that. So I had to educate myself to appreciate that it sounds great, and you've just got to accommodate the microphonic issues. They're not dramatic. They're not unusable. It doesn't squeal when you just get past 6 or anything like that on the volume. It is the way you stand, the proximity to the amplifier, the amount of gain that you've got from a pedal, for example. And as long as you keep that in mind, and it's quite sometimes literally you'll just move and it will go away. So you've got to learn. It's part of the quirk of the guitar, and it sounds so great that it's a shame to do anything about it. It's a shame to mess with it. It's like Freddie Mercury's teeth. Remember, he said, I won't do anything to my teeth because I've got such a great range, you know. So you accommodate the microphone so that you can still have that great sound, you know. It's
in some ways, it's like a living, breathing organism.
It is.
You have to learn to live with it, and it has its own little foibles which you can get around. And once you find a way around it, the rewards are usually very, very good. So can we just have a quick chat about your current rig rundown when you play live? What do you normally use?
Well, when I play live, I've got 2 rock amps live. Or I've got a lot of vintage amplifiers, but I tend to keep those for the studio. But live, I use a classic reverb signature. I think that's the model. It just fills out a mix, and it has a depth to it that I haven't found in another amplifier. So I've got a 100 watt, which is switchable down to 50 watt. And I've also got a little 2-rock jet 22. So if I play a small venue, I use a little 2-rock, which is like an aggressive deluxe reverb. Sometimes I'll use a 66 Princeton reverb if I'm playing a small, very small gig, or when I play with my wife. She does country and Americana, so she wants a more controlled stage environment for volume and things like that. It's probably my favorite amp. It's sweet. I use the original speaker in it sometimes, but I quite often put it out into a 1x12 cab.
I see, okay. Well, one thing I remember, we've sold some amps to you as well as quite a few guitars over the years, and I remember you kept on saying to me, it doesn't matter about the original speaker, because as soon as I get them home, I'm going to change them, I'm going to get rid of them.
It's usually the case. I use a lot of fuzz pedals, so the square wave, sometimes I use a multitude of fuzz pedals and there's a lot of square wave going on. I wouldn't want to risk the original speakers. They won't be able to take that kind of abuse. So I use Scumbag speakers from America. There's a guy in America that makes Celestians like they used to make them in the 60s, but he does them at high wattage. So I use 100 watt a couple of 100 watt speakers in there, so they can handle anything then.
They can, yeah. And they sound as good as the original Jensens or Oxford Utas?
I find with the original Jensens, for my kind of music, they tend to be a little bit flubby on the low end. I love using them in the studio. I've got a super reverb, early 70s, it's a Silverface. The original speakers in that, you can just plug the guitar straight into the amp and they sound great. If you're playing like a bluesy thing, As soon as you start pushing it too much with pedals, the low end goes. So they have a place in certain kinds of music. If you're a straight up blues guy and just plug straight into the amp, if you're doing a clean sounds, you can't top the original Jensens.
Yeah.
But for what I do, I mean, I'm forever chasing the Jimi Hendrix kind of tone. And we all know the story of Jimmy, having to use two 4x12s to accommodate 100 watt Marshall amp. You can't do that nowadays. So I need to use beefy speakers, and there's not many vintage speakers that are beefy, unfortunately.
Sure, yes, okay. And finally, can you just tell me your guitar setup? You mentioned you like to use these Dunlop frets, and what type of strings and what sort of gauge strings do you use?
I use Ernie Ball Power Slinky. They are 11 to 48, I think. I've used them for decades. They're heavy by some people's standards, but I do tune down half a step when I'm playing my own music. I use them at concert pitch as well. The thickness of the string does give a little bit more of a beefy tone, We all went down that route of following Stevie Ray Vaughan, trying to get the 13 gauge, but I didn't get past gauge 11. That was about it for me.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark, for coming here at ATB Guitars and chatting about your vintage guitars and your playing and your style, etc. It's been very nice talking to you, and I look forward to hearing the new album, hopefully by the end of the summer.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.